Welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast with your host, Alvin Bonds II. Join us each week as Alvin explores the relationship between leadership and families by interviewing leaders in different fields all over the world. Alvin believes that the success of tomorrow's leaders begins with the success of today's families.
Hello, and welcome to the Revelation of Hope podcast. I am your host, Alvin Bonds II, and this is episode 26. Today, I interview Brad Federman. But before I get to that interview, I want to talk just a moment about feedback. One of the things Brad talks about in his interview that is also a part of the work he does is 360-degree feedback. Brad talks about this mindset of getting feedback from the people all around you, from your customers, from employees, from family, from friends. So I invite you today to consider getting feedback in your life, asking family what they think about A, B, or C, asking your employees feedback on your performance, asking customers feedback on their experiences. No matter what your business is, or if you provide a service, getting feedback from the people that you provide that service or a product to. And the idea is to go 360 degrees, so all around you. And what I thought was extremely powerful and also indicative of the mindset that Brad has is Brad even asked me after our interview for feedback on his performance doing the podcast. That told me that he is living the work that he teaches. And that's something that we all can learn. Are we living the work that we teach? It doesn't mean that we are perfect. It doesn't mean that we have all the answers, but are we being consistent in what we're saying and what we are portraying to the world, to our customers, to our employees, to our family, to ourselves? Brad Federman is an author, a speaker, and a consultant with more than 25 years of corporate experience in various aspects of human resources, including performance management, employee engagement, employee compensation, executive recruiting, change management, and instructional design. His background also includes sales, marketing, product development, and operation. As the founder of Performance Point LLC, Brad has worked as a leadership coach, a human resources trainer, an executive and entrepreneur with organizations and their executive leadership in different industries. His leadership coaching clients have included names such as FedEx, Embassy Suites, Kaiser Permanente, the Mayo Clinic, Blue Cross Blue Shield, AT&T, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and so much more. Prior to founding Performance Point, Brad was the executive vice president of Novations Group and has held leadership positions with Accenture and Humana Incorporated. He is frequently requested as a featured speaker at conferences and business meetings worldwide. He is the author of Employee Engagement, a roadmap for creating profits, optimizing performance, and increasing loyalty. Brad has been interviewed for Fox Business News' John Stossel Show and has written articles in numerous publications such as American Banker, Fortune Small Business, Los Angeles Times, and HR Magazine. Brad earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications from the University of Maryland and a Master of Education degree in Human Resource Development from Vanderbilt University. He's also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. It's an honor to have Brad on for today's podcast. Well, Brad, thank you so much and welcome to the podcast. Would you take a moment and tell us about you?
Sure. My pleasure for being here. Thank you for having me. My name's Brad Federman. I run a company called F&H Solutions Group. We work with organizations on strengthening their brands through culture, leadership, and people. And really what we're about is improving performance because we improve relationships, culture, and the way people work with each other. So when you wanted to talk about leadership, I was excited about it.
Yes, and so I've read a lot of the things that you have done, and it's amazing. And I'm interested in knowing, how did you get involved in this concept of leadership?
Wow, that happened a long time ago. And quite honestly, it happened when I was in my teens.
Yeah.
And I had a very unique experience. I ran for office for student government, when I was heading into 8th grade. And when I ran for office for student government, I won. And they gave me an award. And the award was that I got to go to leadership camp for a week. Now, I don't know what you were like back then, but when I was a kid and I was, just turning about probably 12 or 13, the idea of getting a leadership camp to me was more of a punishment than it was, an award. And but I went, and I found that I loved it. And the camp was all about learning how to problem solve, work with other people. It was very interesting. And the person in charge of the camp saw something in me. His name was Mike Michelson. He became a mentor of mine, one of the few that I can count on one hand. And he helped me connect with doing more around those kinds of things. And then I got more involved with the organization over time and started staffing it when I got a little older. And I ran one of the advanced programs when I was in college. And I thought to myself, how do I do this in the real life? How do I do this with real people in real life for a career? Yeah. And I started looking at issues around change management, leadership, management development, and I decided to focus on organizational development and communication in undergrad. And then I took a job with Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture, and I focused on change management with them, and that's kind of how I got started in it. So it's just a love, it's a passion.
I love that, and I have become interested in leadership myself, and that's something that affects all of us. And I'm interested in knowing, what does leadership look like for you at work in your business?
Well, for me, in my own business, I think leadership is about creating an environment that breeds trust and transparency, that makes people feel safe, valued, and respected consistently, so that you don't have barriers to performance, and that people feel comfortable tackling anything in front of them. So regardless whether you're in a good economy, you're in a bad economy, whether you're struggling with profit or your profit's really strong, it really is about motivating people to drive you past that and to move the business forward in a productive way where we all benefit, where we all gain something from it. And to me, that's what leadership is about. It's pulling people together in an environment like that where we can win consistently and sustainably, regardless of what kind of environment we're in.
And so how do you personally do that? Because that's something that I see so necessary in any type of organization. How do you go about bringing people together that way?
Wow. So with clients, we do it through some of the training and consulting work that we do. But in my own business, it starts when we're recruiting and hiring people. As a part of the recruiting process and hiring process, I sit down with everyone and I tell them a little bit about our culture. Mm-hmm. One of the things I think that organizations are struggling with right now is all that sense of discrimination, harassment. You see it in the headlines. Yes. Every day there's someone else who's getting called out on things like sexual harassment. And you can probably confirm that. I'm sure you've seen that in the headlines these days, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So one of the things that I think organizations are doing is to deal with that, is that they either ignore it, right, which gets them in trouble, which is what's happening now, or they tend to try and walk on eggshells. Let's not talk about anything that's serious. Let's only keep things to business. How do you build relationships with people if you can't get to know who they are, right? So we've got to find some kind of a middle ground. So I talk about culture, that we want a culture that's open, that's transparent, where everyone can feel free to be who they are. And what that means is that topics shouldn't be off limits. And that we also want to be able to be real people. And that in the process of being real people and having topics not off limits, that one of us at some given time is probably going to say something that someone's not going to like, right? Yeah. That we might cross a line and not even be aware of it because we've got blind spots. And that to work here, we want everyone to feel free to say, hey, that didn't feel good to me. And let me tell you why. Because if you do that, we learn. And we won't do it again, because the last thing anybody here wants is to hurt anybody else. And if we know that made someone feel bad, we will not only stop it and apologize, we won't do it anymore. And so the reality is we have this conversation. So about this, and so we continue that conversation. We have meetings where we talk about our culture, et cetera, on a consistent basis. We have events that foster that culture on a consistent basis. And we have discussions. So, for instance, we have some people here who do not celebrate birthdays, and they don't celebrate the holidays, whether it be Hanukkah or Christmas, because religiously, that's not what they do.
Yes.
And they're very comfortable speaking about that with everyone and figuring out solutions. So we had birthday celebrations in the office. Do we stop? What do we do? Well, no, we actually had great conversations with people that don't celebrate birthdays, and they want us to be able to do that. They just don't want to feel pressured to have to go and participate. And so we've talked about how we do that in a way that they feel comfortable and okay, and that we can still do what we feel comfortable with, and that no one feels left out or antagonized or defensive or not part of something. And so we work through those things and involve everybody in those solutions. That drives that kind of transparency and that sense of safety that exists. Right? And the only way to keep doing that is to keep asking for people's opinions and using them. Right? You can't ask them and not use them. You've got to ask them and use them. And if they say something that isn't going to work or you don't like, then you work through that. But you don't tell them they're wrong, they're stupid, or ignore them. You work with people and you treat them as adults because they have value. Everybody brings unique individual value to the workplace. The question is, do we recognize it? Do we utilize it? And do we celebrate it?
I love that, and I appreciate you talking about transparency and culture and how important that is in organizations. What would be the first step an organization could take in really creating a culture that is open, but also that is valuing its people? What's that first step?
Well, I think the first step really is it has to start at the top. There are so many people trying to do bottom-up culture, and it doesn't work. I'll give you a great example. I worked with a high-tech company, and they had a culture that was terrible. It was awful. And quite frankly, you wouldn't know that by walking their halls because on all the walls were these beautiful values. Wow. Respecting the employee, all these different things. It looked great, but what was espoused and what was actually happening were two different things. And the senior leadership was frustrated with the performance of the organization. They were frustrated with the fact that employees didn't seem to be living up to those values. But when you talk to the employees, and we actually surveyed the employees and then did focus groups, you found out something else, which is the reason they didn't live up to the values is because senior leadership wasn't living up to the values.
Yes.
It was not uncommon to be ridiculed, yelled at, cursed at, even berated in front of other people. And so the conversation really was about the values. Do those values count all the time or just some of the time? Because when the values really need to count? They need to count when it's difficult, when there's a challenge. You can respect an employee when it's easy, but can you respect an employee when it's a difficult, challenging environment? And the value only counts if you can do it when it's a difficult, challenging environment. So when someone makes a mistake, when you have a problem, how do you react? And when we got the survey results and did the focus group results, I actually had to sit down with that senior leadership team and, in a nice way, call the baby ugly. Yeah. I had to tell them they were the problem. And when I did that, there was defensiveness, but I had a process for working through that with them. And eventually I had one person say, I could see how some people would feel that way. And I said, tell me more. And they would give an example, and then somebody else joined in. And then all of a sudden the CEO went, I think we have a problem. I think you're right. And we put a rule in place. And the rule we put in place was a 3-strike you're out rule. Okay, and here's how it worked. You make a mistake of berating and ripping apart an employee like that, not living up to the value that we have said is important to us, and you get a warning, and you get training. You do it a second time, you get a coach. You do it a third time, you're out. And all it took, and it happened within 6 months, was one of the senior leaders hit that third time. And that's when the proof was in the pudding. The CEO, president, let that person go. And the rest of the senior leadership team knew it was serious, and things had to change, and the employees knew it was serious, and they knew things were going to change. And they certainly did. And I can tell you they had an $11 million shift in their profitability the year after they instituted that change.
Wow.
And it was all due to the fact that employees rejoined the company. I mean, they never left physically, but they left emotionally. They left, their souls, had gone. They left the building, but they came back, and they helped the organization do what it needed to do because the organization made a commitment to them. Now, you can filter it through the organization after that, but you cannot build a culture unless your senior leadership is on board and they're willing to be a part of it.
Wow. I love that. And I'm curious, what drives you every day with the work that you do? Where does this passion come from?
I have a deep-seated, and I don't always live up to it, nobody does, but I have a deep-seated love of people.
Yeah.
And I believe that we're all here for a reason and a purpose. And I believe that we all have the ability to rise to levels that we were not aware we could. And I go into work every day believing that if I help an individual or a group of individuals to do that, then I've made this world a little bit better place. And that I just love what I do. I can walk in every day and feel proud of what I do each and every day. And what's great is if you can do it collectively. Mm-hmm. If you can connect with people and see great things happen, not only individually, but collectively, you can change communities, organizations. And so that's really what we're about, is changing communities, organizations for the better. I left one organization the other day, and I was meeting with their leadership, and we were working on some issues around relationships with them, and we did some assessments and exercises with them to get them to kind of get to know each other a little bit better. They'd worked with each other, but they hadn't really paid attention to their differences. And one of the amazing things that happened was they were spending time blaming other people for problems. And what happened was at the end of our time together, they began to realize that they were part of that.
Yeah.
I'm blaming him, and quite frankly, I should be looking at myself. What's my role? And they walked away from that experience with a renewed hope that they can work together better than previously. Now we've got a 6-month to 8-month plan to help them get there. But the reality is we took some great first steps, and to watch people feel the sigh of relief and the sense of looking at their partners in crime, if you will, and realizing they're not bad people. We were having problems, but we're not bad people. That's a fantastic place to be. How can you not enjoy going to work and making that happen?
Wow. And would you take a moment and just tell us about your job or your company, F&H Solutions Group?
Sure, absolutely. It's actually multiple companies that came together. I started a company called Performance Point years ago, and we were focused on employee engagement and customer engagement. So how do you generate stronger relationships with customers that are more beneficial to them, to you, that are more profitable, more partnership-oriented? And then how do you do the same with your employees, right? In a day and age where we've lost loyalty and employee loyalty, largely because we lost also organizational loyalty, how do we create an environment where people want to stay longer and they want to give you more while they're there? And so that was the focus of my organization. And there was another company called J. Glass & Associates, which really focused on traditional HR kind of work, labor relations, those kinds of things. And we came together to form F&H Solutions Group. And we actually have a relationship with a law firm called Ford Harrison that has also invested in us as well. And we came together because we felt like there was a good connection between the organizations, that we almost look at it like this. Do you like sport?
Yeah.
Okay, what sport do you like?
Basketball.
At basketball. So you watch basketball, and a basketball team has an offensive strategy, right?
Yes,
and they also have a defensive strategy, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, organizations are no different. We really came together because we wanted to provide a full-service kind of an approach to an organization. We wanted to be able to say, look, you need a people strategy, and that people strategy needs 2 prongs. You need a defensive strategy and an offensive strategy. In business, a defensive strategy, when it comes to people, means we have all our ducks in a row, we're compliant, and we're not going to break the law when it comes to our people. And that means that you've got to do some things to make sure you have a good compensation plan. You've got to have good policies and procedures. You need to have a good labor relations strategy if you've got unions, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so, quite frankly, if you know you're doing things right, you're not breaking the law, But if you do get in trouble and call on the carpet, you also know you can defend yourself.
Yes.
And then the flip side is you need a good offensive strategy. It's not good enough to stop the lawsuits and those kinds of things. You need to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need a great brand that is supported by our culture, that our leaders have the ability to translate to our employees and put into action things that drive meeting that brand promise each and every day. Are we bringing the right people in? Are we promoting the right people? Are we developing them? Do we have a great succession plan? All the things that we need to be able to do and tie it to that brand promise and culture so that we are successful delivering that brand promise to our customers each and every day. That's how we win new customers, that's how we keep our customers, and that's how we have profitable, strong customer relationships. And so what we really love is when we can go into a company and work on both, because the alignment between those two is what allows you to leverage your people strategy and do great things. All too often, we're called in for one or the other. So, for instance, we might be asked to do some work around engagement and doing an engagement survey. And when we go in and do that work, we find out that the policy and procedure manual is terrible. It's written in legalese, and it's written in a very patriarchal manner. It sounds like you expect your employees to lie, cheat, and steal from you every day, right?
Yeah.
And yet you're sending us on a mission to help you create a culture and environment where people feel like they're family and they want to stay. Well, and you can't have it both ways, right? You can't communicate to them in a way that says, we don't trust you, and then say, we value you, because you create noise. And so what we want to do is want to pull companies together in a way that those things that they have to do because they're just part of a core piece of business from a defensive nature are done in a way that doesn't destroy the trust they're trying to build with their employees and with their customers. And when we put those together and we align them, you can do great things. So that's really what our focus is and how we go about it. We have offices in D.C., Memphis, Atlanta, and then we have people that telecommute from different parts of the country. We work all over the United States. We work outside the United States, Europe, Middle East, Asia, you name it. We've been there, and we've been around for, collectively probably over 30 years, but I would tell you that right now, in this form, we've been around for at least 10. So,
how receptive are your clients to the feedback that you're giving them? And some, like you said, calling them to the rug. How receptive are they?
Oh, some are more receptive than others, and I'm a big believer that you do pre-work. Yeah. You know, I will turn business down. We will turn business down if a client's really not prepared to do the right thing. So we ask questions. We test commitment prior to certain projects to ensure that we're not walking into a bad situation. Is it a guarantee? No, but it does keep us out of those difficult situations. If we get into a difficult situation, and we have gotten into them before, then we handle them in a very clear manner. So I'll give you a great example. I had a person that asked me to coach their second in command. This is the president of a company that wanted me to coach their second in command. And so I started the coaching process. I probably met with that person twice. So we had just started. And the president called me in their office and said, tell me what you're talking about. And I said, we already spoke about this. It's a confidential process. I can tell you what we're working on because he's going to share that with you, right? I can tell you where we are in a process, but I can't tell you about our conversations, what he says to me, what I say to him, because those are private, confidential conversations, and I can't do it. And he said, I'm paying your bills. And I said, you're right, you're paying my bills. But you asked me to work with him, and that's what I'm doing. And if you want me to work with him, those are the conditions. Yeah. And he said, you work for me. And I said, I'll tell you what, let's flip this around. He said, what? I said, if I were coaching you and you had a boss and you shared with me your innermost secrets, you shared with me your concerns, you shared with me concerns about your boss and your relationship with your boss. And then I went to your boss and told him everything you said. Would you meet with me again? And if you did, would you tell me the truth? And he said, no. And he said, okay, I get it. You don't have to tell me. And, you just have to be prepared to have those tough conversations with people that will threaten your livelihood sometimes. It doesn't happen often, but it will. And you have to be ready to say no. And quite frankly, we have lots of different customers, probably well over 200 active clients in a given year.
Okay. And
so if we have a client that says something like that, I have no problem saying, here are the conditions, or we part ways. Because, I have plenty of other people we can work with that will do it under the right circumstances. If we're working with people and we're about bettering cultures, environments of people, then we have to handle ourselves above board. It's like a doctor who says, I will do no harm.
Yes.
Well, you're either going to live by it or you're not. And we live by it each and every day. We have to.
That's powerful. And I wonder, I'm curious to know, what does leadership look like for you in your personal life with your family?
That's harder. That's really more difficult. I'll be honest with you. I think that I'm better in a work environment than with family. Mm-hmm. But I do use it. I do use it as well. And I think it's harder because it's so close.
Yeah. It's
so close to home, and you care so much. And that's when you sometimes overstep your bounds, or you lose patience, and you have to remind yourself that you have to back up. So I would tell you, I think it's more difficult for me, but it doesn't stop me from trying. I always have a joke with my kids and with my friends especially my friends who ask me, how do you do it?
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? How are you such a good father? And I say, I just try and get up every day and do as little damage to my children as possible. It's my joke. But there's a little half seriousness to that, that's, regardless of what you do, even when you're trying to do the right thing, when you have a 15-year-old and they're pushing boundaries, yeah, and they think they know everything in the whole world, and you have to put boundaries there, and sometimes you have to say no, and sometimes you have to punish your kids because they refuse to accept the boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Even with that best intent, sometimes they don't see it that way.
That's right.
They see you as being ridiculous, right? And so you have to hope that over a period of time in the years that all sorts out, and they look back and they go, thank you. I think the biggest lesson I can learn, besides patience, is don't focus on instant gratification. A lot of what I'm going to gain from being a good parent, I won't see for years, and that's okay. It's about a foundation, not about feeling liked, being excited, or instant gratification. I've got to they have to have the building blocks to be successful years to come, and I have to remember that in that process. I'd also say that the other thing is, in business we take 360s for 360-degree feedback, if you know what that is, but it's an assessment you get from your manager, your colleagues, and your direct reports. Sometimes people go to customers and vendors for feedback as well, and they basically rate you on different kinds of things, competencies, attributes, and you get feedback from everybody. Mm-hmm. And the whole reason to do that is to be self-aware and kind of align yourself with them so that you're doing things that they have value for them, and that you're not doing things that don't have value for them, right? Yeah. But it's all about self-awareness. And so when it comes to kids, there are two things that I have learned. One is they will tell you exactly what they think, and so you can get feedback without having to do a survey that is confidential, right? Yeah. And so listening for that feedback and being attuned to it, I think is important. And the second thing is watching your kids, because all too often their behavior, good, bad, and ugly, reflects your behavior. Mm-hmm. When you see something your kid's doing that they don't like, as a father and a mother, you have to ask yourself, which one of us is that? Right? Which one of us does that? And they will hold a mirror up to your face, whether you like it or not, and whether they know it or not, by the way they behave. And if you are willing to stop, and instead of saying, how dare they talk to me that way, right? And say, wow, that's me, then they teach you as much or more than you teach them.
Yes.
From your kids, if you're open to it. And that's leadership, I think.
Yeah. Do you have conversations with your children about leadership and I guess the journey that you've been on?
I do. I have, and I've utilized stories about them in like, for instance, I wrote a book on employee engagement, and there are several stories for my kids that were aha moments for me, and they know they're in the book, right? So I talk with them. I'll use stories about them, and we have those conversations. I enjoy that when we have those moments, and I find them as valuable for me as I hope they find for themselves. So I know that as they get older, I have an 18-year-old now too, and it's funny. They get to that 15-year-old stage, at least my two boys did, and you go from being cool dad when they're really young, right? You're awesome, you're the hero, to you're just a dad, right? And then they hit like 14, 15 years old, and you're an idiot, you're not smart anymore. You don't know anything more. They know the whole world. And I remember telling my oldest son when he was younger and he was acting like that. I used a story from a newscaster, journalist, and I said, one day when you're 21, 22, 25 years old, you're going to come back and you're going to see me in a different light, and we will become friends in some way, shape, or form as you're older, and you come back. I'll always be your dad, but you'll see me again in a different light. Right now, I know you think I'm an idiot, but here's the deal. When we're out, you're going to interact with me, right? And when I want to give you a hug, you're going to give me a hug. And if you don't, I'm just going to tackle you to the ground, hug you, and give you a big kiss on your face in front of your friends. And which is it? What do you want to do? And he said, I'll give you the hug, Dad. I'll give you the hug. And and we laughed. And what's funny is he's 18 years old, and he's already come back and seen me in a different light.
Yes.
He will sit down and say, Dad, can we talk about this? Can I get your advice? You help me think through things. I appreciate the way you talk with me. I can come to you and you're not going to get upset, but you're going to help me work through things. And so we have a very interesting relationship, and I think a very fun and valuable one because of his maturity and his growth. And so part of being a leader, I think, also means recognizing that a relationship's two-way.
Yes.
You can only control your part, and sometimes you have to wait for someone to be ready. And sometimes they're not ready when they're 15 or 16 years old, but you still have to be there. You have to be there even though it's not on the terms you want, so that later on you can be there and it will be on terms that work for both you and your child. I think that is probably the biggest challenge that people face as being a parent, especially during teenage years.
And what is so amazing is that these ideas and this foundation that you're teaching your children, that's going to translate into a work ethic and leadership as they decide to branch out in business, whatever way they decide. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, I hope so. That's the goal. I think the biggest thing for me is I want them to grow up being, and this is something I've really tried to foster as much as I can, being as comfortable with who they are as possible.
Yeah.
And not really hanging on people's opinions. Doesn't mean that people's opinions don't count. If you get feedback from 10 people and it's the same feedback, you should probably listen to it. But not holding your value up to the feedback or the liking or disliking of one person. To me, that's key. And so with my son, I've always said, hey, if you like something, I remember you like Star Wars longer than a lot of other kids like Star Wars. And I said, hey, some of the kids are going to tease you.
Yeah.
Right? And as long as you're comfortable with liking Star Wars and you don't care, that's fine, right? What I want you to be thoughtful about is that you need to be comfortable with what you like and who you are, and recognize that not everybody's going to always accept that. And some people are going to give you a hard time. I don't want you to shy away from what you love and try and be something you don't like because it's more acceptable.
Yeah.
I want you to like what you do like, enjoy what you enjoy, and be comfortable with enough with yourself that if it's not the most popular thing, you're fine, right? And that's really the point I've tried to get across to them is it shouldn't be about what other people think of you. It should be about being comfortable with who you are.
Yes.
You got to be, if you want to be a leader, you have to be authentic.
Yeah. Well, Brad, I appreciate you taking the time for this interview. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we close?
What I would leave with listeners is this. The more that you're able to be curious about other people and live life without succumbing to stress, pressure, and fear. Be more mindful in the moment. The more powerful of a leader you are, and also the more likely it is you'll be able to help people change lives to the positive. That's a powerful feeling, and it's a powerful experience. And I wish that on anybody, because you can't help but feel fantastic in your day when you've had that kind of impact.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, as well as providing a rating and review. Every week, I will interview a different leader and invite them to share with us their views and perspective on the relationship between leadership and family. Be sure to visit my website. It's www.alvinbonds2nd.com. That's ALVINBONDSII.com. Have a great day.